Here we will see attributes of assembly. Assembly attributes are the values that provide information about an assembly. Most attributes are applied to a specific language elements such as classes or methods, but there are some attributes that are global. They are applied to the entire assembly or module. For example, assembly version attribute can be used to embed version information into an assembly. Global attributes appear in the source code after any top level using directives and before any type, module or namespace declarations. Global attributes can appear in multiple source files, but the files must be compiled in a single compilation pass. Visual Studio adds global attributes to the assemblyinfo.cs file. These attributes are not added to the .NET Core projects. The attributes are divided into 4 parts: assembly identity attributes, informational attributes, assembly manifest attributes, and strong name attributes. First we will see assembly identity attributes. There are 3 attributes which determines the identity of an assembly: name, version and culture. These attributes form the full name of the assembly and are required when you reference it in code. You can set an assembly's version and culture using attributes, but the name value is set by the compiler, the Visual Studio IDE in the assembly information dialog box, or the assembly linker when the assembly is created. Different identity attributes are assembly version attributes, which specifies the version of an assembly. It consists of major.minor.build.revision. If it is not specified, the default value is 0.0.0.0. Assembly culture attribute. It specifies which culture the assembly supports. It is applicable only to satellite assemblies. For non-satellite assemblies, it defaults to neutral, which represents no specific culture. Assembly flag attributes, which specifies a bitwise combination of flags for an assembly, which describes just-in-time compiler options, whether the assembly is retargetable and whether it is full or tokenized public key. Then informational attributes. These attributes are used to provide more information about the assembly, such as company or product information. Different informational attributes are assembly product attribute, which specifies a product name for an assembly manifest. Assembly trademark attribute, which specifies a trademark for an assembly manifest. Assembly information version attribute, which specifies an informational version for an assembly manifest. Assembly company attributes, which specifies a company name for an assembly manifest. Assembly copyright attribute, which defines a custom attribute that specifies a copyright for an assembly manifest. Assembly file version attribute, which sets a specific version number for the Win32 file version resource. And CLS compliant attribute, which indicates whether the assembly is compliant with the common language specification. Next is assembly manifest attribute. You can use assembly manifest attributes to provide information in the assembly manifest. The attributes include title, description, default alias, and configuration. Different assembly manifest attributes are defined in system.reflection namespace. Different attributes are assembly title attribute, which specifies an assembly title for an assembly manifest. Assembly description attribute, which specifies an assembly description for an assembly manifest. Assembly configuration attribute, which specifies an assembly configuration for an assembly manifest. And assembly default alias attribute, which defines a friendly default alias for an assembly manifest. Then strong name attributes. You can use strong name attributes to set a strong name for an assembly. A strong name consists of the assembly's identity. It is a simple text name, version number, and culture information, plus a public key and a digital signature. It is generated from an assembly file using the corresponding private key. The public key token is a 8-byte attribute that comes from signing or strong naming the assembly. Signing gives the assembly a strong name. If the assembly isn't signed, it defaults to null. For example, when you create a project, the assembly attributes are generated as simple name, version, culture, and public key. For example, here math.advanced is a simple name, version is 2.0.0.0, and this is the public key token.